Salutations everyone, this is Razor bringing you guys another Overwatch video where today we're talking about, of course, Overwatch 2. It's the code name for the next Overwatch game as far as we can tell according to the recent reports that everyone has been talking about, the leaks of the supposed StarCraft first-person shooter game getting shelved in favor of putting resources into Overwatch 2, quote-unquote, and Diablo 4. Now this seems to be coming from a rather credible source, and it seems to fall in line with everything that we've seen and heard for the past year and a half or so. So this is a very confusing topic according to what I saw on Twitter when Overwatch 2 first started trending. At first I was confused because people were saying that it's been announced or something like that, when of course nothing official has been made. There has been no announcement from Blizzard or anyone from Blizzard or formerly from Blizzard that has said anything about another Overwatch game other than the one that we are currently playing and you are looking at right now. But the sources seem to line up with things that we've known for a while now, including many of the supposed unconfirmed rumors of the next Diablo game, Diablo 4, which we heard about a year ago before BlizzCon was starting to ramp up, and it was expected to be announced or talked about in the very least a little bit. And BlizzCon, of course, came and went. There was nothing about a new Diablo game except for the mobile thing, and everyone's, shit their pants because of how pissed that they were getting a mobile game instead of an actual follow-up to Diablo 3, which is, if you don't know, in the top 10 best-selling video games of all time. It's a fantastic game. I play it still to this day all the time. They keep adding updates and patches and, content here and there, but they've done a fantastic job with that game, with that franchise. And we have to understand a couple of things. Blizzard is a very good video game company. They're very smart. What they do is high quality, and they do not rush things. There is a reason that, they canceled Titan, which was the supposed first-person MMO that then became Overwatch after Titan was scrapped, reusing some of the assets and ideas and concepts such as Soldier 76, which many of you might recall. And the fact that they're, scrapping another game doesn't seem surprising. We know that Blizzard doesn't come out with a lot of new games or even, expansions to their current games. And you have to also realize that World of Warcraft is a huge outlier because it's like the most successive video game possibly ever when it comes to longevity and making money throughout the years. And staying in the cultural zeitgeist and, keeping people on and, selling product and things like that. We know that Blizzard does a really good job as a company when it comes to making money. That is what this is all about. So they don't rush things. They will cancel projects without even disclosing them publicly or, disclosing very little, as what we didn't see with Titan. But they've canceled games in the past before, and we know that Overwatch was their first new IP in like 15 or 18 years or something like that, since the first StarCraft game came out. And we also know that they, along with this quality, they make good shit, and it shows with the sales and with the passion that people have for those games and those franchises. Outside of Vikings, which was Blizzard's first ever game, everything else they've hit has not just been a home run, it's been a freaking grand slam when it comes to popularity and sales and longevity for the most part, or at least defining their portion of the gaming universe during that time. And each has its own spot when it comes to Diablo creating basically its own genre. You have World of Warcraft, which defined its own genre, and then you have StarCraft, which was like the first big esport. and was the first huge thing that was big in Korea that Americans then started to learn about, even though it was an American-made game in StarCraft. And then you had something like Hearthstone, and now you have something like Overwatch and Overwatch League. So Blizzard knows what they're freaking doing. Overwatch 2 is not a sequel to Overwatch. That is just a placeholder for another Overwatch game. Instead of saying another Overwatch game internally, they're calling it Overwatch 2. But it is not the 2.0 version of Overwatch. It is not a replacement for Overwatch. So I saw so many people tweeting, oh my gosh, they're making an Overwatch 2. They haven't even finished the first one, which is hilarious because this game's been finished for over a year and they just keep adding free content over and over and over again. But with how insanely successful Overwatch was, it showed Activision Blizzard and the shareholders and those in charge just how much money that can be made in a year. They made over $1 billion reportedly within the first year of Overwatch's launch. And it showed how successful a brand new IP can be. And they waited a while to take their shot with Overwatch with the failure of the development of Titan. But once they decided what they were going to do was what they were going to do, they absolutely nailed it. And they sold a ton of copies, and Overwatch League is redefining esports as we know it as a spectator sport. For a number of reasons, which seem to be pretty obvious, but in case they aren't, we won't get into them in here. So Overwatch 2 is not a replacement to Overwatch. It is not, they're not giving up on this Overwatch and then starting fresh with a new game. Now, you take a look at their track record and what every person from Blizzard, whether it be Jeff Kaplan or anyone else on the Overwatch team or from Blizzard as a whole, everything is consistent with what they've all been saying about Blizzard as an IP, expanding it to other platforms, other types of storytelling, other types of games, and a sequel, not an expansion to Overwatch. I hate it where people throw it out things like expansions. Expansions don't really exist outside of World of Warcraft and Destiny. And you take a look at something like an Uncharted or I can't think of the other example that I had, but something that runs off the same engine and is like an offshoot of an existing game, but it's not an expansion because everything's digital now. Everything's separate. It's not a full-fledged game or a $60 game or a standalone release necessarily needed per se, but just an expansion of that world. Lost Legacy, Uncharted Lost Legacy wasn't Uncharted 5. It was just another Uncharted game running off Uncharted 4's, engine. And we know from what Jeff Kaplan has said is that PvE was not what they had in mind when they designed Overwatch's engine, which they built from the ground up. So obviously all the PvE elements from these events had to be built on the fly. When they decided to make the events like Junkenstein's Revenge or all of the anniversary and archive events that we have seen. So the next Overwatch game, from the leaks, it's said to be a PvE Left 4 Dead style kind of game. People will say they want a looter shooter or some sort of MMO, but take a look at things from Blizzard's perspective and from a money-making perspective. They aren't making a ton of money off of Overwatch anymore because everybody already bought it, right? They're not making as much money off of loot boxes as they once did, and with all these laws, and shit going around with loot boxes being illegalized in all these countries and gotcha games and all this stuff, there's writing on the wall that this type of model is no longer something that can support a game of this stature and may no longer be legal 5, 6, 10 years from now, or 2 years from now, for all we know, with the way that the government's fucked up and how they think video games are these weird things that you put quarters into and Pac-Man shows up because they're all fucking 90 years old making these laws and don't understand shit. And you see on the local news they're like, video games is a professional thing now, ain't that something? Fuck those people, right? So Blizzard is in the area of making money. So they need a model that's more sustainable than the current super duper success that Overwatch is. It's such a huge brand at this point, with all of the Funko Pops and the figures and the t-shirts and the Overwatch League and all of their merch and the Lucio O cereals and the Lego and the Nerf. It's a huge cultural hit and people love the characters, and we've all been starving for lore and story content, right? And Blizzard knows this. They're very well aware. And Jeff Kaplan himself has said live in front of people on camera, on stream, and said if there was going to be a PvP or story mode like element of taking place in the Overwatch universe, it would be a separate game. So that is what Overwatch 2 is. It's not a sequel to Overwatch as we play it today. It's not a replacement for Overwatch, just like how Hearthstone wasn't a replacement for World of Warcraft, or World of Warcraft wasn't a replacement for Warcraft. Those were two completely different genres taken with the same IP of Warcraft, right? So it's very much within that same vein, and you can take a look at Heroes of the Storm as an expansion upon all of Blizzard's IPs, right? So people need to get away from the ideas that Overwatch is a failure and they're scrapping it and they're starting anew, or that this is a sequel and, you know, everything we've invested isn't going to be paying out. Just take a look at their investment into Overwatch League. It's a huge undertaking with huge buy-ins, and it's super duper successful. It may not, you know, pull in as much viewers as, you know, some big Fortnite tournaments or League of Legends streams and have $16 trillion prize pools, but it is doing better than they initially estimated it to be. And you have some big companies vesting teams into this league, and it's being very, very successful. So just take a look at Overwatch League by itself to show you that Overwatch is not being abandoned. They're not stopping it. They're adding additional characters and maps for the foreseeable future, and, you know, skins and content and stuff. But as far as expanding the brand, Overwatch it's overgrown the garden that it's been put in, right? They designed these amazing characters with these incredible designs and diverse backgrounds and shapes and sizes and abilities that people want to see more. We want to know, what's the deal with Lucio? We need to know his story. You know, we were starving forever for Diva content, and we don't know about, you know, Pharah, or, you know, what happened between, Reyes and James that ended Overwatch and them being outlawed, and, you know, Doomfist getting out. There's so much story that we want, you know, a TV show, which seems less likely to happen because Blizzard has come out and said that they're in the industry of making games. While it would be great if there was an awesome, you know, CG animated or anime style Netflix show that gave us all the lore in the world, and we got more and more comics all the time, that doesn't seem to be what is in their near future. Maybe if things become even more and more successful, they'll keep expanding. But as far as the Overwatch brand, they want to expand more into the games. They have the characters that we know and love. They've capitalized on that with their merch amazingly, and in the esports world. So this is just the next step. Video games, especially in Blizzard's world, don't take just a couple of years to make. This was obviously a planned option when they first announced Overwatch, and they're taking a look at how successful it was and how more of a success than it initially was planned to be, and how Overwatch League was bigger than they thought it was going to be. And they're still having a hard time keeping up with the demand for certain kinds of merch, and people are buying the new action figures that are out, the Figmas, the Legos, the Nerf. Some of that stuff is still really hard to find, and they're coming out with new stuff and shirts and exclusive things and more DLC characters that are completely for free. So they've established a very strong brand, and they are really handcuffed in what they've been able to do story-wise, but there is clearly a reason for that. I've spoken to Michael Chu in person, and I asked him if he could tell me the names of Brigitte's other cats. He told me they all do have names, but he's not allowed to tell me any of those cats' names. That's how tight-lipped they are about their franchise. The voice actors are not allowed to comment on the certain ships and OTPs that their characters are in. They can just say, oh, I love them all, right? So there's clearly something going on with the story that they're holding back with. This was obviously evidence when they stopped making the comics and kind of are restructuring how they wanted to do outside of game story content. But they know we want it, and they're going to give it to us. They're all about making money, and they're going to give us what we want because we are voting with our dollars. People say they hate DLC, and that's completely wrong. People love DLC. People will always pay for DLC because that's what they want, and that's where the money goes. So people can't say that, oh, I hate DLC or map packs or new characters, because you end up buying them, right? People can't say, oh, I hate loot boxes, because if they didn't sell well and didn't make money, then they wouldn't be made, right? And these aren't just a couple of whales or outliers that's making money for these companies. This is what people want. People want to buy expansions. People want a dating sim for Overwatch. You know, I don't care what other Overwatch game they come out with, whether it's a gacha mobile game that's kind of crappy on, or, you know, low on the kind of, you know, gameplay experience I can get. I'm gonna get it. I don't care what this next game is, whether it's PvE, whether it's just a long story mode. They're going to find a way to monetize off of the success, because there's a black hole, right? People want more from Overwatch, whether it's they want more better balancing or more characters to come out sooner, or they want more merch and, you know, more things to cosplay. They're going to give it to us, but Blizzard is very careful and slow with how they deal with these things. So it makes perfect sense to me that they are working on another Overwatch game. It would most likely be another first-person shooter, but even if it isn't, that's still going to make perfect sense with the characters in the universe that we know, whether we're fighting in the Omnic Crisis or in, you know, post the Recall short with Winston, where they're getting the whole team back together. We're getting something. Maybe it's not exactly what you want, or not everything that you want all at once, but this is Blizzard we're talking about. They saw the huge success of Diablo 3, so yeah, there's going to be a Diablo 4. It's probably been in the works for a long time. We know multiple Diablo projects are in the works. Those are Blizzard's words themselves. We know the different types of teams that Blizzard has working on things. There's the Overwatch team, the StarCraft team, the World of Warcraft team. You have the Hearthstone team. You have the team that's involved in remasters and stuff like that. We know they're working on multiple Diablo things. They see where the money is at. They're going to give us what we want eventually. And the same thing goes for Overwatch. It's a huge success. They've invested heavily into this. Michael Chu is doing something at that company. And we're all just going to have to patiently wait and hope for the best, that we all get the kind of content we want, whether it's wholesome or romantic or action or esports related. Overwatch 1 is a great game. It will continue to be supported, refined, and hopefully be the best possible game that it can be, and be a foreseeable major staple in esports on ESPN or Disney XD or Twitch or wherever it may be. And a future Overwatch game is inevitable, regardless of how you felt about Overwatch at launch or how you feel about it now. This game isn't going anywhere, but the brand is going to continue to expand. That is all that we know, and can hope that this leak is true, that it could possibly be announced this year, but Blizzard is going to take their damn time, because we know they don't half-ass shit, and they are not afraid to erase the board and start from scratch whilst taking the best pieces that they've already built.